if the white spikes from the Tomorrow War were to meet the Xenomorphs from the Alien franchise. The Xenomorphs and white spikes are both proficient, aggressive, and territorial predators. Both alien species are so territorial that they will kill everything in sight. Both alien species have a queen, although the white spikes seem to have several queens over specific regions. The Xenomorphs are many in number, but the white spikes seem to outdo them in their sheer numbers and explosive populations. Both the Xenomorphs and white spikes are intelligent creatures on an individual level. They both have some form of armor, with the Xenomorphs having an exoskeleton and the white spikes having dorsal armor, which they are intelligent enough to use when under fire or attack, bending their heads and bodies in such a way so that strikes will hit their topside. This means that their underside is very vulnerable. And even though the movie is very inconsistent, with them showing their bellies on several occasions when roaring, which is not very efficient as a battle tactic, I would think in a real scenario, with them fighting other aliens or opponents, that they would protect their undersides at all times. From what we know, the white spikes only have one form. Their six-legged form, or rather a body with 4 true legs and 2 arms used for grasping and climbing. Xenomorphs seem to more or less mimic the forms of their host via reproduction, but always seem to have 4 limbs. This is probably because most of the hosts that they use for their reproduction have 4 limbs, like humans, cows, dogs, and other 4-legged animals. The way that Xenomorphs are able to move strictly depend on the body type or body plan that their host had. The white spikes are very quick and nimble and can climb any surface, smooth or rough, upside down, right side up, and move in any direction. They can jump very high, and they have 2 tentacles on their dorsal side that they use for shooting out what seems to be calcified projectiles. But they also use their tentacles to interact with things, such as moving things, lifting themselves, climbing, fighting, squeezing, grabbing, and other actions that humans would use via their arms. Xenomorphs don't have these tentacles, but they do have very, very long tails, especially XX121, which is the classic Xenomorph, and these long tails are usually a bit longer than their body, and prehensile, which means that they can wrap their tail around objects to either throw them or to hoist themselves up. And on the tip of those long tails are these dagger-like protrusions that they use to pierce through prey or enemies. They're as lethal with their mouths as they are with their tails. You wouldn't think of it just looking at them, because even though their teeth are very human-like in cases, the real weapon lies within their jaws. A second set of jaws that can pierce through metal and shatter bone. Some Xenomorph forms have a lesser version of this, but their teeth are so strong that no matter what the jaw form or physiology, they seem to be able to capably bite through the human body with quick vigor, but their preferred weapons are their claws and their tail. This is because their claws or arms allow them to have more reach, and their tails allow them to have the greatest reach of all. They too are super quick, and even the bipedal Xenomorph body plans are able to run on all 4s at will to cover long distances very quickly. For the XX121 classic Xenomorph, their estimated sprinting speed is about 60 miles per hour. The white spikes too are able to move very quickly, but they seem to be much faster, possibly due to their hind legs being so powerful and long. Not only are they able to sprint, but they can run for long distances without getting tired. The white spikes will continue chasing prey tirelessly, and even though the Xenomorphs don't seem to get tired either, the white spikes seem to be more pugnacious in their pursuit. They also have the ability to leap very high into the air. Stretched membranes that connect their limbs at the base on their body allow them to glide in the air. This is also to cushion their fall if they have to jump from very high places, or to give them reach when hunting or evading. The white spikes don't have laryngeal jaws like the Xenomorphs, but their jaws are very, very powerful, able to crush bone with ease. Once the white spikes lock onto a target, they will not give up until that target is neutralized. They are also intelligent enough to find different ways based on the target to bring the target down, and will work together in a coordinated attack to neutralize their target. Xenomorphs are also intelligent and great at solving problems, just like the white spikes, but they seem a little less coordinated than the white spikes when hunting. They seem very social and do seem to have individual personalities, but they're more aggressive towards one another. And so at times it would seem as though the Xenomorphs behave in a chaotic swarm and less organized. As they are going after their prey, they don't seem to communicate with each other, but allow their numbers to make the effort worthwhile. Xenomorphs have one mission, and that is to protect their queen and to continue reproducing. They behave more like supersized alien bacteria and less like a pack of wolves, unlike the white spikes, who are very organized, coordinated, and seem to prefer to work together. They seem to recognize each other on an individual level, and are able to call out orders to specific members of their group when hunting. This makes them almost 100% successful in each of their hunts, because they are able to communicate with each other over long distances. In both the species of white spikes and xenomorphs, their queens are always much larger, even though the xenomorph queen is significantly larger than the workers or drones. The female of the species of white spikes, or the queen I should say, is also larger than the males or the workers or drones. But whereas the xenomorph drones are only a third the size of their queen, the white spikes drones are seemingly half the size. Both the queens of the respective species are usually much more intelligent than that of the rest of them, but the white spike has got the xenomorph queen beat on intelligence by far. She definitely is able to protect herself, and both the xenomorph queen and white spike queen are able to call the drones to their aid as needed. The xenomorphs and white spikes have the ability to be stealthy. Regardless of whether it's light or dark, the xenomorphs seem to be able to see or at least sense their prey. Xenomorphs have elongated cylindrical skulls, and it doesn't look like they readily have eyes, but actually underneath the visor or underneath the membrane of the skull, or the thing that we see that looks like the melon, are eyes. They might not be eyes in the classical way that we know eyes, but in the movie Alien, Ash had speculated that the xenomorphs see by way of electrical impulse, similar to that of the shark's lateral line, or how sharks would detect their prey in the water. This makes them ultimate hunting machines, and they're able to sense their prey no matter where they are. This makes it difficult to hide from a xenomorph if you're hiding out in the open. The white spikes are also very good at hunting prey, and they also utilize smell to triangulate where their prey is. One thing that really sets the xenomorph apart from most other alien species is their blood. Almost every form of xenomorph has blood that is said to be a potent molecular acid that functions as a highly corrosive substance that can burn through any natural or man-made material very quickly. Sometimes the xenomorphs would even weaponize their blood, usually when they get injured by other xenomorphs or enemies, and will either flick their blood at the enemy or try to get their blood on whatever it is they're trying to kill. They know very well that their blood is lethal. Xenomorphs usually won't go out of their way to hurt themselves so that they can use their blood as weapons. They will use what's on body first. However, if they are injured, this is one of the fail-safes that would end up killing or fatally injuring or mortally wounding whatever it is that's trying to kill them in the moment. They also utilize their blood to get through to places. In Alien Resurrection, the fourth Alien film released in 1997, there was a scene where the xenomorphs were kept in cages, and two of the xenomorphs figured that the only way they would get out is that they had to sacrifice one of their brothers. There seemed to have been a momentary conversation that went on with the two xenomorphs. Right before the third xenomorph is attacked, the other two xenomorphs say something to it or seem to chatter. The third xenomorph in the middle responds by whining, as though in distress, as though what the other xenomorphs told it didn't make it very happy. Very shortly after that, the other xenomorphs start roaring at it, letting it know that whether it wanted to or not, this was going to happen. They then swiftly attack the third xenomorph, knowing that this was the only way they'd be able to escape this compartment. They might have been saying something like, "We'll make it quick." Well, that xenomorph died very quickly, and its blood pooled on the metal grating below them. As a result, because the blood was so highly corrosive, we saw how in seconds it burned a gigantic hole through the area, allowing the other xenomorphs to escape. No doubt that this corrosive alien blood would not only easily corrode the body of the white spikes, but with ease eat straight through their armor. The xenomorphs are many in number as well, although I think the white spike population is much more. If a bunch of white spikes, say 30 of them, were to swarm a xenomorph and try to kill it, all of them would die in the process. When the white spikes directly confront something, they use their jaws. Their jaws are connected to their brains. It seems whenever their heads are decapitated or impaled, the white spike ceases to function, which leads us to believe that they carry their brains in their heads as well. The xenomorphs are also able to swim, and the one thing that I don't know is how their acid would work in water. Both the xenomorph and white spikes are very strong, and listing out all these stats, it almost seems as though they're evenly matched to a point. There's one trick that the xenomorphs do have up their sleeve: their reproduction. Unlike the white spikes, the xenomorphs require a living host organism as a vessel so that they can lay their eggs into. Their life cycle is really strange. So what happens is the queen, or whatever xenomorph needs to at the time, lays an egg. inside that egg is a strange Lovecraftian hand-like thing with a tail. It's disgusting. This thing itself is only an automated vessel. Its only purpose seems to be to find a living, breathing host that it favors, to clasp itself over the host's head, wrap the tail around the host's neck, and implant the embryo into the host's gullet. During this time, the host is put under anesthesia and is paralyzed. It doesn't remember anything after the facehugger is removed. These facehugger or embryo vessels die almost immediately after they implant the egg successfully into the host, and the host will get up and not remember the event and will probably even see the facehugger's body beside it and still not remember. It's like it's programmed to forget everything about the facehugger or the fact that there's an alien growing inside of it, which is what makes it so lethal and creepy. Just like the Xenomorphs, the facehuggers also have that acidic blood. So if someone else were to try to remove the facehugger from the host, the acid blood would come out, either killing the host or mortally injuring the person trying to remove the facehugger. As the facehugger falls off, the embryo or the little baby alien starts growing inside of the host. As it grows and develops, when it is ready to get out, it starts eating its way through the host. This is why they're called chest bursters, because their method that they will probably use is bursting through the chest, and sometimes through the back or out of any area that is easy to get out of. The alien embryo inside of a host functions more like a cancerous growth that assembles itself using the host's own cells and biological materials as building blocks. The corresponding transfer of genetic material, referred to as the DNA reflex, causes the physical attributes of the adult creature to vary. This is why xenomorphs that hatch from dogs or burst out from dogs or canine-like creatures will have a lot of the physiological similarities as canines, and xenomorphs like Xenomorph XX121 will have physiology similar to that of humans. A lot of the time you can tell what the host of a xenomorph was based on its physical attributes. Can you tell what this one is? Now, the reason why I set that up is, number one, for people who don't already know that, and number two, because imagine if the Xenomorphs were to lay a whole bunch of their embryos inside of these poor white spikes. There would be hell on Earth. The Xenomorph would take on physical attributes and some of the latent attributes of the white spikes as well. That is a way they're able to adapt to their environment and to be on equal footing or always be an advantage over the apex predators or whatever is around them. A Xenomorph breeding with the white spikes would probably also have tentacles, or maybe two tails, very sharp teeth, and very powerful hind legs. The Xenomorphs would already be lethal to the white spikes because of their blood, but imagine having a Xenomorph that also could match the white spikes in their agility and abilities. Alright, now that we laid all of that out, let's set up the scenario. Now, if we had one Xenomorph, let's take XX121, which is the classical Xenomorph from the original Alien franchise, and let's take a regular drone white spike, say the male. What would happen if these two met? What I've noticed is that white spikes don't technically attack on their own. One might start the charge, but then the others soon follow afterwards. However, they're so aggressive I wouldn't put it past them trying to take on something that is their size or smaller, or maybe even bigger. A white spike and a Xenomorph would see each other on their terrain. Open terrain with rocks and cliffs so that they could climb and get away if need be. The Xenomorph would stealthily approach. The white spike would be a lot more cautious, and not having any of its buddies around probably would not attack right off the bat, since it knows it's not going to get any backup right away. The Xenomorph would start with a bipedal run, and then go onto all fours and explode into a full-on sprint towards the white spike. The white spike would start shooting its projectiles at the Xenomorph, screaming in anger and aggression as it does so. Knowing he is by himself and not knowing what the hell the Xenomorph is, the white spike would scale one of the cliffs or rock faces. The rock faces here would probably go up about 50 feet. The white spike would turn around and climb with ease while shooting its projectiles as well, and would be quite surprised to find that the Xenomorph is not fazed by this at all, able to also scale the rock face. Even though the Xenomorph is making quick work of scaling this rock face, it is very clear that the Xenomorph is not as adept as the white spike at climbing. As the white spike reaches the top, it would continue shooting its projectiles. The Xenomorph would get cut, its acid blood spewing everywhere, holes all over its body, spikes sticking out of it, but it would continue going right for the white spike and eventually would catch up. The white spike would use its tentacles to fight off the Xenomorph, both of them now on the edge of the cliff. The white spike would climb on top of the Xenomorph that, despite the Xenomorph looking lankier, it would be just as is quick with its motions, turning over quickly to grab the white spike and push it onto the floor. The white spike would bite into the leg of the Xenomorph and then into the face, and would be met with a hot, searing pain that's very familiar. The white spike, having a scuffle with the Xenomorph, didn't realize at first that the acid blood was burning through it, the blood oozing from out of all of the cuts and pierces by its projectiles. White spikes have a very high pain tolerance, and at times won't even notice that they're in pain. Oh, but now the white spike feels it, because a whole bunch of the Xenomorph corrosive acid blood is burning straight through its face, and in mere seconds the white spike stops kicking and convulsing and dies. The Xenomorph 2 is mortally wounded, but before it could be fatal, the blood would usually stop the aggressor very quickly. Unfortunately for the white spikes, as intelligent as they are not immune to corrosive blood. This would have been the first interaction that the white spike had with a Xenomorph, and it's its last. The white spike had no way of knowing, unless it previously encountered a Xenomorph, that the blood would be acidic. However, there are white spikes in the distance from a higher elevation watching this happen. The victor Xenomorph lets out a cry, and other Xenomorphs start to come towards the area. The other white spikes had been watching the fight, observing their enemy, realizing from even a distance that this creature has acidic blood. They know they can neutralize it with their numbers, but first they would try ranged attacks. Seeing the horde of Xenomorphs below, the horde of white spikes stay above the cliff that they're on and start shooting in unison. The white spikes are very well coordinated. Their queen is in the distance, and they don't want the Xenomorph to go past a certain point. That would be very dangerous for their survival. So one of the generals on the cliff orders one of the other white spikes to take a group and intercept the aliens below. The white spikes are able to take down the aliens in the front row with their projectiles, and there being so much more of them, the ones in the front and the ones on top of the cliff. The Xenomorphs realize that there are white spikes on the cliff as well, and quickly break off into several groups and start to swarm that cliff face. The Xenomorphs know that these projectiles are going to hurt them, but now that they all have acid blood raining down their bodies, they know that all they need to do is get close. The white spikes are intelligent enough to know that they would have to aim their projectiles at the Xenomorphs' heads to bring them down. This effectively works, but as the Xenomorphs get closer, the ones from the back, the white spikes know that they have no choice but to charge. The general at the top yells to the general at the bottom, who gives the orders for his group to charge. They swarm the Xenomorphs. The Xenomorphs also learn quickly. Even though they don't coordinate with each other as well as the white spikes do, they do learn from experience, from seeing what other Xenomorphs deal with, and from fighting themselves. They quickly learn that the white spikes are vulnerable on their underside, and as if in unison, they all start using the size on their tail to impale and slice and slash at the white spikes. The white spikes continue swarming the Xenomorphs and are able to take some of them down, but too many of them are dying by biting into the Xenomorphs and meeting their swift deaths. This move is not even killing all of the Xenomorphs. Even when maimed, the Xenomorphs are still able to get up and run and utilize their blood as weapons to the others. Unfortunately for the Xenomorphs, even though the acid is eating through the white spikes, they will not stop unless the acid connects with their head and brain. Both parties are utilizing battle of attrition tactics. One of the Xenomorphs, however, sees the general at the top of the cliff, and as it heads straight for the general, a large group of the Xenomorphs break off and head for that general as well. Fortunately for the white spikes, they have so many different generals that can fill the role if one falls. As a matter of fact, each of them can function efficiently as a general as need be. They are one unit, a well-oiled machine. Many of the white spikes die. However, it takes much more of them to bring down the Xenomorphs. The Xenomorphs can definitely kill them faster than individually white spikes can kill Xenomorphs. The only thing that works in the white spikes' favor is their numbers, which far outnumber the horde of Xenomorphs. It is believed that the reason why the queens are so important is because they continue reproducing. Because the white spikes' metabolisms are so fast, in theory, they could grow at a much more alarming rate than the Xenomorphs would. The Xenomorphs can grow too, but they need a host. Their queen is also a lot more helpless when breeding. My theory is that the queens of the white spikes can breed on the go. As we saw in the movie The Tomorrow War, in which they were introduced, the white spike female looked as though she was pregnant. It's possible that she may lay and keep going, and lay some more and keep going, unlike the female queen Xenomorph that stays in one spot and continues breeding in that area. This allows white spikes to continue to replenish their numbers at a much faster rate than the Xenomorphs can. While at first it looks as though the white spikes are losing, simply because they're all getting obliterated by the blood of the Xenomorphs, if this battle goes on long enough, over time the white spikes will prevail, not because they're stronger than the Xenomorphs, but because of their intelligence and their knowledge that their numbers will prevail. Their numbers will usually outlast whatever it is that they're trying to bring down. It is strictly a matter of who is the first to depletion, and in this case, it would definitely be the Xenomorphs. Even if within or behind enemy lines, there would be hybrids of these white spikes. The numbers of pure white spikes would simply always be too much for the Xenomorphs to make any headway. 100 of the white spikes would die, 500 would take their place, which is why no matter how many of them you kill, they always seem to keep coming and never stop. Like flames burning through a planet filled with only oxygen, the white spikes prevail. So in theory, that's what I think would happen. 1-to-1, the Xenomorph would definitely win. The Xenomorph's blood really proves to be very handy when fighting something, as if that thing tries to kill the Xenomorph, it dies. However, when it comes to hordes, based on what we know about Xenomorph population versus what we see about the white spikes, even though the Xenomorphs have the ability to swarm as well, their population simply is not as prolific as that of the white spikes. The white spikes would win. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.